All right, good evening, everybody. Today is Sunday, March 22nd. It is day 5 of our shelter-in-place order in Sonoma County. I want to provide you with a few quick updates. Number one, we have 25 confirmed positive coronavirus cases currently in the county. We have actually performed 528 tests now, both between our public health lab in Sonoma County as well as our private lab partners. And you can expect to see that number continue to grow in the next few days. I found out a couple days ago that we've actually had a backlog of testing on the private health side. Quest is our primary private health tester in Sonoma County, and they were actually performing tests across the entire country. So people from all around the country were sending their tests to Quest, and so that led to a bit of a backlog. So we should see those numbers of tests increase pretty dramatically in the next few days. And indeed, we've already started to see hundreds more tests coming in over the weekend. I want to talk a little bit today about opportunities to help. I know that a lot of us feel a little bit helpless in this situation where, we know that there's need out in the community. We know that there are people who are stuck at home that need food, that are going to need assistance, and yet we're all supposed to social distance, right? So how can we help? Well, I've got a few different options for ways that we can help our community. Number one, if you have any unused, new, still in the box PPE or personal protective equipment, we actually now have a way for you to be able to donate that. And I know that since this is Sonoma County and since we went through 2 catastrophic wildfire seasons in the last few years, that a lot of us have those N95 masks lying around. So if you have any N95 masks that are new, open, unopened, unused, you can actually drop them off at 93 Stony Point Road in Santa Rosa. And that's the Salvation Army. And they will be accepting them Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Please only donate PPE if you are feeling well, if you are healthy, right? And really, ideally, it would be great if you got, a few boxes or something, but we'll take anything at this point. I also wanted to mention that they will be accepting unopened protective goggles, as well as unused original packaging hospital gowns. So those are the big 3 needs right now. That would be N95 masks, and they can be either with or without the little valve. Protective goggles, as well as hospital gowns. And so those can be donated to 93 Stony Point Road, Salvation Army, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. The other thing is that we are actually actively soliciting volunteers. It's been a really big challenge for a lot of our nonprofit organizations, especially those that deliver food out in the community to people who are medically vulnerable, or maybe the seniors in our community. A lot of them actually rely on retired people who are the actual base of the volunteers. And so since a lot of our retirees are appropriately self-isolating at home, our nonprofits are actually struggling to be able to deliver those food items to different people who need them. So if you are young and healthy and you want to jump in and help get some food to some of those folks who really need it, you can go to cvnl.org. Again, that's CVNL, and that stands for the Center for Volunteer and Nonprofit Leadership, cvnl.org. And from there's a little icon that says what we're doing about COVID-19. You click on that, you click one more time, and it will get you to the Sonoma County specific link. And then that will actually channel you over to the Volunteer Center, where they're working with all of the different wonderful nonprofits in our community to help care for those people who most need it in this moment. I also wanted to announce a couple of virtual town halls that are happening. One is happening Tuesday, March 24th from 5 to 6 p.m. on KBBF. 89.1 FM. That is our Spanish language virtual town hall. So Spanish speakers might want to tune into that one. We're having the English version of that, English language, from 7 to 8 p.m. and that will be in partnership with KRCB. You can actually stream it on YouTube, on Facebook, on their NorCal Public Media website, and also on KRCB FM Radio 91, as well as KRCB TV 22. So that's another way of getting information. Dr. Mace, our public health officer, will be there answering questions. I also wanted to give a shout out, and I know I shouted out last time, but Keysight did come through and they delivered a bunch of PPE over to the Emergency Operations Center. So a huge thank you to a local company stepping up. And actually Sonoma State also contributed a substantial amount of PPE to the EOC. So we can get that, sorry, I'm speaking in bureaucracy. EOC is the Emergency Operations Center, and again, PPE is personal protective equipment, which is that critical life-saving equipment that our nurses and our physicians need to stay healthy, right? Your masks, your goggles, your gloves, and all those kinds of things. I also wanted to give you a little bit of an update on what constitutes an essential versus a non-essential business. This has been, I think, a big item of confusion where people don't know, do I stay open or do I stay closed? Some of the things that have come up recently, we want to let you know that IHSS workers are considered essential. So if they are feeling healthy and well, they should continue to provide that critical care for those who need them. Dog groomers are not essential. I have actually heard quite a bit of disgruntled feedback from poodle and schnauzer owners. I apologize, your dogs will be a little extra fuzzy for a while, but dog groomers are not considered an essential service. Veterinarians are, so if there are any urgent needs, you can always take your pet to the vet. I also want to be very clear that vacation rentals and hotels for tourism are not an essential business. This is not my determination. This is not my opinion. This is actually sort of the language that is in the health order by the state of California. But I do want to note that actually vacation rentals and hotels could remain open if they choose to provide a critical function. Critical functions include shelter for disadvantaged or needy individuals, including housing needed for social distancing, or support housing necessary for an essential business to operate. For instance, if they are providing shelter for traveling nurses, that would constitute an essential use. And so those are the instances in which a VRBO or a hotel can stay open, but they cannot be utilized for short-term vacation rentals for tourism, people just coming up here for the weekend. And I know that I have received a number of complaints about businesses that are continuing to operate. So we're going to move forward with education, let people know that, they're not doing the right thing if they're not doing the right thing, and we will follow up with enforcement actions if we need to. I like to think that people are just not understanding the full sort of magnitude of the order right now. But if people are willfully disobeying the order, that's not okay. It's putting the public health at risk. And it's also not fair to the other businesses, because we have a lot of businesses who are doing the right thing. And the right thing is actually hurting them economically and financially, but they're doing it anyway because they recognize that they are making a sacrifice in the greater interest of the community public health. So those are my primary sort of public service announcements of the day, and I am happy to take any questions that people might have. So I'm going to look over to my husband who's following questions. Do we have any questions? Let's see. I've got a bit of a comment here. We need a coordinated message regarding what is and isn't allowed as far as people driving out of their own areas to hike and go to the beach. I completely agree with you on that. And I've actually been constantly on the phone this evening touching base with our Regional Parks Director, Bert Whitaker, with our Director of Health Services, with our CAO. I do want you to all know, if you haven't heard about it already, that Marin took the unprecedented step of closing down all of their parks. So as I understand it, I was coordinating a little bit with Supervisor Dennis Rodoni, who represents Western Marin, and he informed me this afternoon that the public health officer actually issued an order that closed not only the regional parks, but also state parks and national parks, as well as local parks that are sort of inside city jurisdictions. So that was effective as of this afternoon, and there's been a lot of conversation with various parks directors all around the Bay Area about what that means, whether other counties will follow suit. So I just want to let you know that's something that I'm tracking very closely, and we're having a lot of conversations about. I really think it's very critical to make sure that we are preserving public health, right? We need to make sure that we're keeping people healthy and that we're minimizing transmission risks. But we also need to figure out where are the most likely transmission risks. For instance, I had already had conversations with regional parks about closing all of the restrooms because that's a high-touch area that could lead to transmission. So please stay tuned on that. I just want you to know that it's on my radar, and I am actively working on that, and we should have more information about regional parks very soon. So,
a question of what can we do to get our hospitals to institute hazard pay for essential hospital personnel?
Oh, wow, this is a great question. What can we do to get our hospitals to institute hazard pay for the critical personnel? I mean, I think that that's something where we could start to create public pressure. This is an absolutely essential function right now. We have to have our healthcare system, and yet we also have to acknowledge that our healthcare workers are putting themselves at risk by taking care of all of us. So I think that we should definitely lift up our voices as a community to try to demand hazard pay for our nurses and for our healthcare workers in this moment. I would also say that I wish that we could pay our grocery store clerks more money right now, because they also are putting themselves right in the line of, seeing a lot of people and performing that very critical function for our community. So if you do have to go buy groceries, Please observe proper social distancing, keep your 6-foot distance, and thank your grocery store clerk, because they are the unsung heroes right now. The folks who are checking us out and who are making sure that we all have food in our pantries. Really, really critical role. Any other questions?
Can you confirm how people can find out what is or isn't an essential business? There's a hotline. Is there a list somewhere?
Yeah. The issue around essential businesses is a little bit complicated, and it's complicated because we have the state order and we have the local health order. And my understanding, and I want to get perfect clarity from our county council around this, but my understanding is that whatever is more restrictive is what sort of is the law of the land, right? So if you have parts of the local health order that are more restrictive, that actually would supersede the state order in those instances. But if the state order is more restrictive than the local order, then the state order is the one that has precedence. So I want you to know that we are working on a list of frequently asked questions and frequently asked businesses around the public health order. Feel free to email me, linda.hopkins@sonoma-county.org. And if you've got any particular questions about whether your business is essential or non-essential, I can absolutely look into it and follow up with you. We do also have the general coronavirus hotline, and I don't have it written down right now, but maybe my husband can look it up online and get it back to you, or I'll post it in the comments after the video. So we do have a hotline where you can call in and ask questions. 211 is also a resource, and they would probably be able to route you to the coronavirus hotline if that's what you're looking for. So 211 is always a great way to start. Give a call to 211, and then they can route you where it's appropriate to answer those questions. Oh, I see that Vesta has a fantastic question. What is the county doing to limit spreading the virus among homeless camps? This is actually something we have an entire team within the Emergency Operations Center working on addressing the needs of our unsheltered population. Number one is that we are actually going through and analyzing all of the different homeless shelters that we have in the county to be able to actually enforce adequate social distancing to keep those shelters safe. Unfortunately, this means that we're going to have significantly lowered capacity in our shelters. So, where you used to have 100 people, you might only be able to fit 50 in a way that is safe. And so we're looking to stand up additional shelters. We're looking to put our trailers that we have to use. We got 10 trailers from the state of California, and we're hoping to utilize those for our unhoused residents. And we're also working very closely with the clinicians who tend to serve this population. West County Health Centers actually has a specialized team to address the needs of the unsheltered, as well as Santa Rosa Health Centers also has clinicians that focus on the unsheltered population. And so in conjunction with those folks, anyone who is moved out of a shelter and into another form of shelter will receive follow-up care and screening for the coronavirus. So we're taking this threat very, very seriously in our unsheltered population. And a lot of them, unfortunately, have other existing medical conditions. Many of them are also actually seniors. And so we're trying to assess who is the most vulnerable and how can we make sure that they are in an individualized housing situation to keep them safe. So let's see. Oh, I see a great suggestion from Brenna. Could we not utilize schools with bathing facilities for unhoused residents as well? That is actually a great idea and one that I will pass along. I've actually received a few different offers from folks who own motels to also churches that are interested in supporting this work. Since a lot of these facilities are now vacant and empty for the duration of the crisis, we do have an opportunity to utilize some existing space.
Do you have any updates about if adequate testing is available in the county?
Yes. So great question on testing in the county. We still are facing a national shortage of swabs and reagent. The public health lab actually is now able to manufacture its own culture. So we are trying to step up our capacity within the public health lab to provide critical supplies that are in short supply nationally. So we are actually doing some good work there. There is still a backlog of testing in the private sector. And while we have enough tests to sort of test the more critical cases, there is not widespread, kind of drive-through style testing available at this point in time. So we continue to advocate for more widespread testing. I've heard some exciting reports of different testing that has a shorter turnaround time. I know that Dr. Mace is following up on that, and so hopefully we will be able to have that more widely available in the future. We continue to advocate. I've actually been on the phone with some representatives in our local congressman's office every day, and we're just checking in and saying, what do you need? And top on our list are swabs and reagent and testing capacity. So it is a need across the country, and we continue to advocate. I will say that, it's really important to know that when you ask for a test, if you don't have symptoms, your doctor is probably not going to give you just a test, right? Because they are looking at who is a higher risk group. So, they have guidelines that they're using. They're also using their own medical judgment. So your physician is always your first line of defense. If you suspect that you have coronavirus, if you suspect that you have flu, if you suspect that you have any kind of transmissible disease, call your doctor, and then kind of go into detail. They'll ask you about your history. They'll ask you about your symptoms. And they will ultimately be the person who either recommends that you be tested or not. So. Other questions? There is one question that says, am I getting any sleep? The answer is not very much, but I have a 1-year-old, so that's to be expected. But
there's sort of discussion about whether private construction on private homes is allowed.
That's a great question. So question on private construction on private homes. This is one that I want to double check because I don't know if there might be some element of the state order that has superseded the local order. But under our local health order, construction of residential homes was permitted. And I actually was in touch with sort of Keith Woods, who heads up the North Coast Builders Exchange and represents a lot of local construction businesses and county council to provide clarity because there was some confusion over whether commercial facilities are allowed and whether it depended on the type of commercial facility. For instance, if you're building a hospital, one would assume that we would like you to continue building that hospital. If you're building, a warehouse, is that considered critical? So I will definitely look into that, but per our local health order, residential construction, because shelter is an essential service, was allowed. And I can definitely double check and make sure that that's true even after the state issued their proclamation. But generally, it's sort of construction in and of itself is not necessarily the essential service, right? It's what they're doing that is providing an essential service. And I will note that it's very important, that electricians and plumbers can still troubleshoot what's happening in your home. So those are considered essential services. And if your toilet is overflowing, we are not going to stop someone from coming and fixing your toilet, right? That's obviously an essential and critical service. So I see a question mark, National Guard to help in food banks, food delivery. That is happening at a state level. I have not heard anything about that happening in Sonoma County yet. I would imagine that they are focusing on the highly densely populated areas in Southern California or the Bay Area. And this actually speaks to the fact that we are short on volunteers to distribute food right now, because we are short on retiree volunteers, which have been the people who have generously given of their time and themselves to all of our local nonprofit organizations in Sonoma County. So that's one of the reasons I believe that Governor Newsom, requested the California National Guard go out and help so that we can actually help those folks who are self-isolating at home and don't have an ability to either afford or purchase their own groceries. So really critical that we keep the food supply going. Oh, and I wanted to let you know we are continuing to work on food supply issues. We're not concerned about the general flow of food into Sonoma County. I want to be very clear on that. But we are concerned about those vulnerable members of our community who are self-isolated at home or who are out of work right now and are short on food. So we're trying to make sure that we have a whole resource list for people so that they can get the food when they need it. And if you go to socoemergency.org, we actually have a specific page for folks who may be socioeconomically disadvantaged. We also have a whole page for seniors and medically vulnerable folks. So if you go there, you will see lists that will help you out if you fall into one of those categories. One has a list of where there are different food distribution and food delivery options in the county. And then the list for the medically vulnerable actually has all of the grocery stores in Sonoma County that we know of that have special senior hours. So you can find out when your grocery store is opened. If you are older and you're concerned that you're medically vulnerable to the coronavirus, you can go to the grocery store early. So it's really great that our private businesses have stepped up and are helping our community out in that way.
When will the food bank be in
When will the food bank be in Guerneville? That is a fantastic question. I do want to give a shout out to Jennifer Wirtz, who is our Municipal Advisory Council representative in Guerneville. And she actually, through the Russian River Alliance, has already been distributing Safeway gift cards as well as gift cards to local restaurants down in the lower Russian River. So if there are folks who are already feeling penny pinched and need some food, I would encourage you to reach out to the Russian River Alliance in that part of the neighborhood. And I can definitely follow up on and find out what other food distribution resources we have in that area.
She asked the question.
Oh, Jen asked the question, of course. That is a good question, Jen, and I'm glad that I was able to give you a shout out. I swear I didn't know it was you asking the question. So, other questions?
You might mention that Press Democrat way to check and see if businesses are open or not.
Oh, yeah.
Also relating that if someone asked, should people be reporting businesses that are not essential that are operating?
So 2 questions. One is, should people be reporting businesses that are non-essential that are staying open? Please do. So if this is something where you feel that it's genuinely creating a public health hazard, you can actually call the non-emergency law enforcement hotline. Law enforcement phone number. So if it's the sheriff, if it's an unincorporated area, you would call the sheriff's non-emergency number. If it was inside city limits, you would call the appropriate sort of police department. So Sebastopol Police Department, Santa Rosa Police Department. If they become overwhelmed with the sort of calls and the complaints regarding non-compliant businesses, don't worry, you will actually be routed to a voicemail box that is set up for this purpose, and then law enforcement will be checking that voicemail box twice a day to follow up on that. It is really important that we police ourselves on this. And I always start out by saying, hey, business, maybe you don't know, this is actually illegal. You shouldn't be operating right now. And then we'll follow up with code enforcement action. But we have to stay safe. And in order to do that, we do need to take care of everyone, in our community, make sure that we're all on the same page. It's also not fair. If you have businesses that are following the rules, and then you have businesses that are breaking the rules, that are actually benefiting financially from that and putting our health at risk, we cannot allow that to go forward. So it is important to call and make that complaint if someone is operating and they shouldn't be. And I see that someone says that Food Bank Guerneville School for Guerneville School families on Wednesday at the school from 11:30 to 1. That is fantastic. I also see a question, are schools going to close down for the rest of the year? According to Governor Newsom, it is unlikely that the majority of that schools will reopen. I will just be very blunt. And I have always assumed as a parent that if my daughter's school shut down due to the coronavirus, that it would not reopen before summer, because it's going to be a pretty high barrier to reopen, right? We have to be at a point where we feel that lots and lots of children, hundreds of children, can come together and not, create a health risk for the rest of the community. So if you're a parent like me, I think that you should be mentally and emotionally preparing for the fact that your child will be out of school through summer vacation. So we are going to be our teachers. We're going to channel all of our teaching energy for the next few months and make sure that our kids keep learning. And I also want you to know that I have been in conversation with a number of different school board members, superintendents, and schools are working very hard to develop online curriculum. And if your school, has an online curriculum and you, for some reason, don't have access to a computer or don't have access to the internet, you actually have ways of doing that. So schools are actually loaning out laptops, and we actually have telecom companies who are going to be stepping up and providing local Wi-Fi service for anyone who doesn't have it. So it's really critical. We want to make sure you have what you need to teach your child. So. All right. Any other questions? I'm gonna look to Emmett. They're coming in quickly, so I can't necessarily keep up.
People discussing the beaches and whether they'll be closed or not, and how we can stop people from coming into Bodega Bay from out of town, and is it actually violating the rules to drive 30 minutes to recreate?
Yeah. So with respect to driving to recreate and sort of the use of our beaches, because Marin did move forward with closing all of their parks, that means local, state, federal, whether it's inside a city or outside a city, all of their parks are closed as of this afternoon. There is some concern that might increase pressure on other park systems of neighboring counties like Sonoma County. So those are conversations that we are having right now, and it's happening actually with all of the park directors around the Bay Area, how to address the use of parks in this era of coronavirus. So I don't have any firm answers, but I do want you to know that our public health officer is looking into it, our regional parks director is looking into it, and those conversations are ongoing. Our parks are a fantastic resource. I think that they really can provide a lot of mental health and wellness benefits for our community. Exercise, just that relaxation of getting out into the open air. And I know that any decision to close those parks and to, eliminate that asset will not be made lightly. And so we're having those conversations about how we wrestle with this, because we also need to make sure that we're keeping people safe. And, I've actually read some articles, I think it was in the Chronicle, where the intent of the statewide shelter-in-place order was really to shelter in place in your community, in your county, and to only travel outside of your county for essential activities. So that would mean, if you are a healthcare worker that lives in Sonoma County and actually serves, works in Marin, of course you are allowed to travel for that. But the idea was not what we saw happen over the weekend, where we had lots of people from kind of all over the Bay Area coming in and convening at the Marin coast, which I think was actually swamped even more than the Sonoma coast was. And that's when you start to have concerns, obviously, about community transmission occurring. So we're having those conversations. We've got the public health officer on it, and I will let you know as soon as I know. And I've been on the phone about it all night, so lots of moving parts right now. Yep. Any more questions? Got any last questions? All right, they're flying by sort of fast and furious. I wanna just mention one last thing before we wrap up. Any final questions? Just gonna sort of going once, going twice before we wrap this up. I really want to give a huge shout out to the people who are doing things right. I have seen grocery stores that are being very, very careful about limiting the amount of people that go in, maintaining social distancing. And I know that there are many instances where recreating is happening in a totally appropriate way, where you have family groups that, live in the same household, they're hanging out, but they're sort of working with that 6-foot distance between themselves and the next person. That is fantastic, and we need to make sure that we are all on the same page in following these kinds of protocols going forward. Because at the end of the day, we're only as strong as our weakest link in the community, right? And we have vulnerable members of our community who are very concerned right now about this virus. People who have, COPD or pulmonary issues, are elders in our community. And so it's critical that all of us, even though it's challenging, even though we want to be able to do things like normal, that we recognize that we are not in a normal situation, and that we need to step up in this moment and take care of not just ourselves, but our entire community. All right. Any last questions? I have one more from Vesta, which is childcare for working parents. I wanted to mention that the county is actually working on standing up childcare facilities specifically for healthcare workers. We're following models that have been used in other counties, and we want to make sure that if healthcare workers have children who are out of school, that they are not, having to stay home to take care of their kids. But we're trying to set up very small group childcare facilities for them, and I hope to have some public announcements about that, exactly where and how and when it's going to happen very soon. But the Emergency Operations Center has been working around the clock on this issue because we have to make sure that our healthcare workers have all of the tools that they need in order to be at their jobs and safe. So that means PPE, that means childcare, and I love the suggestion that was made earlier this evening regarding hazard pay, because yes, they're on the front lines for us, and we need to step up and take care of them. So thank you all very much. I'm going to cut this short because I've got some more work to do before I get to bed. But stay safe, be well, and as always, send me an email, linda.hopkins@sonoma-county.org. Or you can give a call to our line at the Board of Supervisors. It's still active. We are working virtually and remotely and all over the county, but we're still here for you. And if you ever have any questions, let us know. It's my job to fight for you, to get as much information I can to you as quickly as possible, and to see what we can do to get through this together. We've been through a lot together, and we'll get through this one too. Take care.